Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Thrive After Sports. I'm your host, as always, Taj Dashaun. If you're joining us today on Author Spotlight through the Self-Published in 30 Days podcast, we appreciate you being there as well. Folks, we got a special treat today. This is someone I've had the pleasure of connecting with. I think it's been a couple of years at this point, but really over the past year, we've been able to work on some exciting things together. I have tremendous respect for this woman. I love the work that she's doing. I'm here today with Madeleine Barlow. Excuse me, Dr. Madeleine Barlow. Let me put some respect on this woman's name. What's going on, Madeleine?
Hi, everybody. Oh, I love that. That was a cool introduction. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. I've been looking forward to this interview since we scheduled it. For anybody listening who isn't aware of Dr. Madeleine Barlow, for some reason, if you've been living under a rock, Madeleine Barlow is the founder of MindWise Mentoring. She's an adjunct professor, sports psychology coordinator, and performance coach at Drexel University. She's a Reiki practitioner. She is a 2-time author, soon to be 3-time author, actually. I could go on and on. I mean, did I leave anything out, Madeleine? Is there anything that I left out of that?
No, I feel like that's just about it.
Okay, cool. Okay. And that's just what I know about you, just on the surface. But, I don't like to read bios or do super long intros. So can you just let the world know, just a quick intro, who is Madeleine Barlow and what are you up to these days?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. It's so good to be here. Yay. Thank you for having me. I'm Madeleine. I think the only thing really that wasn't in there is just my background in sport. So why don't we even start there a little bit? So I was a swimmer. I swam competitively from 8 until 22. Swam in college, swam on a club team at the same time as my high school team, balancing all of the things, school, et cetera, as we all can probably resonate with. But that was a really, really big part of my journey. It's what led me to go into school for sports psychology in particular. It gave me the highest highs and the lowest lows and all of that. So I would say that's where my journey really begins, is in the pool, under the surface of the water. And as we'll probably get to, I'm also a very deep person, which makes sense to be under the surface. I like to get under the surface with other people and with myself. You see what I did there? I know, look at me go. I never thought I'd become that corny person, but here I am making dumb jokes and I love it. It's fine. So that's a little bit about who I really am. I feel like in the last year alone, I've really come home to myself and I've begun truly embodying who I really am at my core, which is a sensitive human being, which is, like you said, a woman too. That's a really cool thing to embody, especially right now. Being that powerful feminine energy in the world is so important to me. And again, all of it really starts with jumping in the pool and using that experience to learn more and more and more about myself.
Right. Yeah. And Madeleine, you touched on it just a second ago when you talked about being highly sensitive. And I consider myself a highly sensitive person as well, which we would definitely dive into at some point during this interview. In fact, for anyone who doesn't know, Madeleine has a book coming out. It's called The Highly Sensitive Athlete: How to Embody the Magic of Your True Self in and Out of Sport. That is going to be a phenomenal book. I've been itching to read it, but I'm going to wait till I actually get the physical copy in my hands to read it. We will talk about the book as well, but I want to take it back to the beginning of your journey. So being an elite swimmer in college, did you have aspirations to compete in the Olympics, or what was the tail end of your collegiate career like?
Sure. So I will say, at my parents' house right now, there is a book that I made in 2nd grade that was called When I Went to the Olympics or something like that. I don't know, or When I Go to the Olympics, right? So I will say at some point I wanted to go to the Olympics, and I'm sure a lot of athletes can resonate with that, and all of our journeys are very different, but that was just the be all end all, or it felt that way. But at a certain point, I recognized that that wasn't my personal journey any longer. And really, I chose to swim because I loved it. I loved it until the day I didn't anymore. And it brings a little bit of tears to my eyes, even when I think about it, because I loved it so deeply. But like I said earlier, it also brought a lot of disappointment and pain in a number of different ways, whether that was injury, whether that was mentally, emotionally, all of that. But when it came down to it, I did it because I loved it. And then towards the end was when I really didn't anymore, but I was still doing it. So the end of my swimming career was pretty painful. It was like a relationship you're in for, again, like 14 years of a relationship, and then it's over. And even though maybe part of you knew it was meant to end, part of you had a really hard time letting go. So that's again, a big part of my journey moving forward into school, moving forward into who I work with now, the athletes I support now, and also a big part of the books I've chosen to write, and the things that I've chosen to write and share about is the end being a bit traumatic, even a huge loss.
Yeah, let's stay on that for a second, because I know that you and I have talked about this offline at length. And I was sharing with you before that, and I know a lot of the athletes that you and I encounter and work with and have conversations with as well, when you're going through that, when you kind of fall out of love with your sport, it seems like you're the only one. I know you and I have discussed that. And so I share with you, I fell out of love with the game of football probably around my sophomore year. I wasn't getting the playing time I wanted. And I just felt like I was ready for it to be over, which was a weird place to be. Like, I couldn't wait for football to be over. But what is it that had you kind of fall out of love with swimming? What was that experience like, just as a whole?
Yeah. It's such a sad experience just to begin with. You think about anything though. You love something and then you fall out, and it's not that I hated it. I didn't have this like horrible grudge against it. But there were just certain things that were going on that led to me feeling the need to separate. So for me, it actually was the environment that I was in. And I didn't come to realize this truly, maybe until I read or wrote my book. It might not have come about until I was sitting and thinking about what I wanted to write. And I recognized that really I gave some of that love and power away to other people in a way, the people in the environment. And I didn't know how to deal with the environment. So we'll get to that again when we talk about the highly sensitive athlete, but I really wasn't sure how to navigate everything that was happening within my teammates, or with my new coaches that I was working with, and just being at a different level. So all of it together was really hard for me. And so I think I started blaming the sport for that. I was like, oh, I hate swimming. It's swimming I don't like anymore. Like, swimming brought me that disappointment and things like that. But really, it was in part me allowing my environment to really taint the sport that I loved for so long. So seeing that with clear eyes has been very cathartic, I'd say, to really understand that swimming never hurt me. People did, and it is what it is. And myself, not necessarily taking care of myself while I was swimming. So I'm so sorry to all the pools out there that I blamed for for my sadness. But really, it's come full circle for me to be able to take responsibility for how I felt and my actions, and then also how I navigated the environment that I was in.
Yeah, you bring up so many interesting points, and I had a similar experience personally. And I know I'm sharing this, and I wanted to stay on that for a second with you, because I know how many athletes or current or former athletes are going to be listening to this, and they'll be able to resonate and know that they're not alone in this. Where I wasn't necessarily blaming football, but I did blame the coaches for so long, even afterwards, for it's the coach's fault that I had this experience, versus looking at if I was equipped, or if I had been exposed to tools, which is a lot of the work you do now. If I had been exposed to this type of work and have this understanding of myself, like you said, I would have been able to navigate a little bit better than I did. And so you had the sort of tail end of your experience, which wasn't so enjoyable, kind of fell out of love with the sport. And then what was the transition, after college like for you? How did you sort of, what was your landing? I use the word landing. Like, what was your experience going into the real world? I'm using air quotes.
I landed straight on my face, if we're going to go with that. Okay. Yes. So at the beginning, it was a lot of pushing away that loss, not dealing with the loss by covering it up with other things, right? So I would try to cover it up with, I paid a lot of money, more money than I should have been paying, for a trainer, like a physical, personal trainer, to try to stay in shape, because I just couldn't find the motivation to do that on my own. That was one thing. Definitely tried to cover it up with one too many beverages, if you know what I'm saying. And then also I even went so far as to always have the TV running. I was trying to just distract myself from how I really felt about that loss. Because I think something that happens way too often is that the loss of your sport is just pushed to the side. Oh, just move on. It's time to move on. You'll be fine. Things like that. When in reality, it's so important for us to recognize it for what it is. To some, it can really be equated to a death. It really is. It's a death of a part of you, of who you were, or some part of your identity, depending on how much you identified with your sport. That's another thing. So for me, it took me many, many, many years to actually look that in the face, to acknowledge it, to go inward, to explore that loss so that I could move on in a way that was right for me, instead of just throwing it to the side. So it took a lot of time. I would say I didn't start dealing with it until about 6 or 7 years after the fact. So it was very challenging. And that's why I know it's a part of my purpose now, to help people navigate that time, because you do not have to do it alone.
Right. Yeah. And I just want to take a pause, Madeleine, to just acknowledge you and say thank you for actually being vulnerable enough and willing to share that. Even with the one too many drinks. Personally, me, after college, I was drinking a lot too, trying to cover it up and to deal with it. So I thank you for sharing that with us. And then how did you, once you started to pull yourself out of that place, and like you said, it took about 5 to 6 years for you to start processing and doing what you needed to do to put yourself in position. How did you decide that you were going to dedicate your work and your life to being able to help other athletes? Was it just something that clicked one day, or was it a gradual process? Can you just give us a glimpse behind the scenes, how this all came about?
Sure. So I went, right out of college into my master's program. So I feel like this is an important part of this process. And in my master's program, for most of it, or at least the first year of it, I really tried to not think about swimming at all. Didn't want to think about it. Again, you just ignored it basically. But then eventually, it came creeping back in, just not missing getting up at 5:30 in the morning to jump in a cold pool, not at all, but missing, what it felt like to be an athlete, to be a part of something bigger than myself, I guess you could say. So that's when I started looking into sports psychology programs in particular, because I knew staying in the psychology realm, staying on the mental side of sport was super important to me. So eventually that led me to go to Temple University, and that was my PhD program in exercise and sports psychology. But at that point, I still didn't think I could touch the transition. I remember my first year, I was like, I can't study that. There's so much bias. That's a horribly, challenging thing for me to even think about for myself. There's no chance I can study that, until I realized I could, until I felt like I had to. Athlete identity was actually the first thing I decided to study. And that in turn eventually led me back to saying, okay, Madeleine, like this is what you have to do. You have to research the transition. You need to look into what would help people feel supported in that transition. You know, what are the right resources, or what are the certain things that would be useful for people to understand. And I've always been a person who didn't want to just do research for the heck of it. Like it had to be able to apply it.
Right.
And even my professors were like, oh, you can't apply everything. I'm like, yes, I can. Yes, I can. It's going to happen. So I think I was at like a meditation retreat actually, where we were doing this just very like open awareness type meditation, and it plopped right in for me. Like I was like, okay, this is what I have to do in my business. This is what my business is meant to be, is helping people in transition into life after sport. So it really did. It was like a quick switch in that moment, but you can see how one thing led to the other when I just leaned in. I leaned in to my interests. I leaned into my own experience. And I leaned into ways that I could truly help and become the person that I didn't have.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to talk business for a second, because there are a lot of, as you know, a lot of athletes, I mean, we make great entrepreneurs, you know, which, I mean, we'll talk about that in a little bit too. But I mean, you were already researching, like you said, not that you were going to apply it. You made sure you made that a point to tell your professors that. But you were already doing so much in the university setting and researching and, you know, studying. What is it that had you, why was it important for you to be able to branch out and start your own business? Because that's when you decided to start MindWise Mentoring, correct? Yes. Okay. Why was it important for you to branch off and have your own business, for you to be able to operate outside of the university setting and be able to serve in a capacity that was true to you?
You know, that part that you said right there is exactly it. It is true to me. On one hand, I've also always wanted to be my own boss. I've always wanted to do it. I had never really thought too much of it, but there's something about really doing it my way, and not in like a, you know, my way or the highway type situation, right? But like, there's just certain things that I was saying this earlier, there's just certain things I know how to do, and I want to do it this way. And I think it's this deep inner trust and inner knowing that is kind of hard to explain, especially even if you think of like working in higher education, everything is like evidence everything. And I'm not saying evidence isn't good, because I literally got a PhD that's research based, right? But it's about like finding the really nice balance to me of both, of trusting intuition and our inner wisdom, which I think is something that can get cut off in sport sometimes, because we begin trusting people outside of us, right? We begin trusting or thinking our confidence comes from outside of us, or, you know, we learn things only when we're told by others, things like that, you know, that type of conditioning. And what I wanted to do is help people go inward and rediscover that intuitive voice, that intuitive wisdom, whether it's their body's wisdom telling them what type of, you know, or form of movement they want to be doing. Like, I will never go for a run ever again, probably never, because it's not my jam and it doesn't feel good. But I love going for walks, and it took me 6 years to realize walking is exercise. What? Wild. So wild. And so really finding that balance in my business of, okay, trusting that intuitive knowing, that intuitive wisdom, and bringing in all of the, you know, evidence-based practices that I have learned, combining them. And it's just made so much sense to be able to do that in my own time, in my own way, in my own business.
Yeah, I love that. And then, you know, you're already doing this great work. You start your business and you're already serving the athlete community. Every time I look up, you're on a different panel, or you're speaking somewhere else, or you're on a different podcast, or you're putting out a piece of content that is super impactful. And then along comes the book, the first book, the first of three, Highly Sensitive Athlete. Can you just talk a little bit about, number one, well, I definitely want to get into the title. There's a whole world that we're going to get into why it's called The Highly Sensitive Athlete. But why was it important for you? Why was it put on your heart to be able to write a book? And how did that whole process come about?
I've always wanted to write a book my whole life. It's just been something I've wanted to do. I don't remember when I first felt that way, but I've always loved reading. I've always loved the act of writing. That probably was my favorite subject growing up, and it came really naturally to me. I didn't have to try that hard when I was writing. It just was, it just came out. It just flowed out. So that's a big part of why I wanted to write a book. I did notice when I was finishing up my PhD that research writing was getting hard. It was feeling a bit restrictive, I guess you could say. While I appreciate it, and I'm so glad I had those experiences and it taught me so much, I wanted to write in a much more open way, a more flowy, again, intuitive way. And so writing a book has really allowed me to do that. And I hope I can write many, many more, because it's just really fun. It's a really fun process for me. Because what I'll do is I'll just sit down and I'll write a whole chapter in 2 hours, because it just flows out and that's it. And it's written, which is very cool. So that's that piece. And the way I came about to write this book is, well, first and foremost, meeting you. So let's just say that, because it was perfect timing. It was like very serendipitous, I will say. Having that thought in mind, it was coming back into my mind, like, this is the book I want to write. I just have no idea how I'm going to do it. And then we reconnected like 2 days later, which was wild. And it just made sense. So that was really cool too. But this book in particular, I think it was last April that I realized I wanted to write a book about being highly sensitive and being an athlete. And I wrote this title down, The Highly Sensitive Athlete, April 23rd, this is important, 4/2/3. I'm very big into numbers and like signs and stuff. And when I went back in time and looked at the date, or when I wrote this title down to figure out what was I thinking about when I wrote this title? Backwards, 4/23 is 3/24, which is my birthday, which are my lucky numbers. So that to me was like really impactful and made me recognize, like, this is the title. This is what it has to be. Because as you can tell, it's pretty straightforward. It just is out there and it gets to the point really quick. So I knew this was the book that I had to write.
Right. Something I want to go back to that you just touched on, Madeleine, is how you talked about, it's almost as if all the work that you were doing through the research papers and the dissertation, like you said, very structural, very educational based writing, was almost like working the muscle for you to be able to apply almost that skill of being able to crank out the words, but use it in a creative capacity and come from the heart with it. So that's really cool. And that's why I'm even more excited to read the book. And then can you just dive into it? So people who aren't familiar with what highly sensitive means, what HSP is, can you dive a little bit into that? Because I think that's a huge pillar of your book. And I think that's what makes it so impactful. Aside from everything you're talking about with transition and athletics, can you just talk about the HSP side of things for a little bit?
Sure. So to be highly sensitive is to feel deeper, notice more, observe deeper, perceive things on a deeper level. Deep is the key word here, it seems, right? It's just really being so attuned to your environment, to yourself. Again, like, feeling is a big piece of it. It's not the whole story, because I think that's a piece that, and I do write about this, that is often just not necessarily thought of in the correct way. Like, sensitive does not mean overly emotional, and sensitive doesn't mean weak. Sensitive is noticing, picking up, right? Perceptive, thinking ahead even, right? So you can have a sensitive athlete on the field or on the court or wherever, especially team sports, ball sports, you may be the person that knows where the ball's going before it's going there, right? Just some way, somehow, you're noticing, you're feeling, you're understanding, you're caring. That's what it means to be highly sensitive versus hypersensitive. And that's, that would be, don't have the coping skills yet to navigate your emotions and how you respond to your emotions. So that's a really important distinction that I make pretty quickly in the book. So to be sensitive is just to be deep, very deep.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you said sensitive does not mean overly emotional, and how it's not a weakness, and it can even be a strength. I think you and I have talked about this because we both identify as HSP.
Yeah.
I definitely do see. Oh, here's a quick question before I forget to ask you. Do you have to be introverted to be a highly sensitive person?
Nope. Okay. I love that question. Yeah. So that's another piece of the book where I really clearly distinguish between introverted, extroverted, shy, highly sensitive. They're all different because highly sensitive is a trait, right? It's a trait that we can have. Now, some people are genuinely born highly sensitive. Some people become more sensitive because of their experiences, right? That's an important thing that can happen over time. And it just depends. We're all so unique, which is fascinating. That's why I love psychology, because we're just so unique. It's very complex, but really, really cool, the uniqueness of human beings. So a highly sensitive person can be extroverted. Absolutely. They can also be introverted. They can also be shy. So introversion and extroversion are less about whether you like being around people or not, and more about how you recharge your energy. So for me, I am introverted by nature, but that means that I'll go to a function, to an event, to a party, whatever. And after a few hours, I need to go home and recharge my battery alone. That's how I get my energy back. An extroverted person could stay at that party and keep regenerating their energy. Then you have someone who's shy, who, again, it sounds like what it is. You're just not as open necessarily to maybe even strangers' energy, right? Like I think often it's like when you're around strangers, you're around people you don't know, you're going to be much more quiet versus someone like that is shy, but they're around people they're comfortable around. They could be the life of the party. It just depends.
Right. Yeah, that's thank you for making those distinctions. And just, we're getting a masterclass on here today, folks. If you're tuning in, this is that PhD level education right here, folks. This is awesome. And you touched on this earlier, Madeleine. You are we're far from wrapping up, but I just want to touch on a couple of things right now. You are a writing machine. You said you want to write several books. Obviously highly sensitive athlete is right around the corner from the official launch. It's available for pre-order right now. Where can people get that book?
MadeleineBarlowBooks.com.
That's it. MadeleineBarlowBooks.com. Make sure you visit. Also on there, you will see, I got it right here behind me, Athlete to Entrepreneur. If you're watching on video, make sure you grab a copy of that from Madeleine as well. There she is right there.
Yay.
Boom. If you're watching on video, you can see this. That official launch is happening it's dropping on August 28th. So make sure you tune in for that. And then you're also a part of The Sacred Feminine, which is a creation from my fiance, Jamie. I haven't, like I said, I don't read any chapters until the official book comes out. We know, you just told us what Highly Sensitive Athlete is about. We know Athlete to Entrepreneur, you're talking about how you actually built your business and what that was like, and just going into some of your journey there. Why did you decide to contribute to The Sacred Feminine? What's your contribution in that book?
Oh, well, I feel like first and foremost, it was just Jamie's energy. It like called me the heck in. which was really cool. And I think that speaks to the book as well, right? It is about sharing that divine feminine energy. And, you know, we were talking earlier about the intuitive voice, right? The intuitive wisdom. I think that's a big part of it too. And that's been something I've been dying to share more of with the world. You know, you think about sport in general, right? The overarching themes of sport, it's overtly masculine, right? Sport just by nature is overtly masculine energy, not necessarily just, you know, it's clearly not all men in sport, but it's an overtly masculine energy in terms of being structured and consistent and goal oriented, you know, always taking action and moving forward. And then you have the deep conditioning of like, go, 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 do the most, never rest, blah, blah, you know, all of that stuff. That's overtly masculine energy, which is fine. It is what it is. But my intention is to bring more of that feminine energy into the space, and especially with the athletes I work with, because we need both to be, quote unquote, yeah, I'm now air quoting, successful, whatever success means to you. We need both masculine and feminine, yin and yang energy. We need the rest. We need intuition. We need to find stillness so that way we can access whatever it is that's within us that's meant to be expressed. So that's really what attracted me to this project in particular. And so it's a combination, again, of me sharing some of my personal experiences with it, talking about energy. I do talk about, you know, Reiki in there, so energy in general. I talk about finding your joy, really, because joy is such a powerful, powerful emotion, and can combat a lot of the lower, you know, vibrational things like fear, guilt, shame, so on and so forth. And really being able to let people know, might seem out of left field, but it's really not, that it's okay to change your mind. You know, when your interests change, or when your path feels like it's changing, whether that's in sport or in life after sport, it's okay to follow the new path. And that's kind of what I ended on in the chapter, because I was a constant mind changer. I changed my mind about everything. I changed my dissertation topic probably at least 3 times. I committed to one master's program and changed my mind and went to a different one. And, you know, I was just always changing my mind about something, but recognizing that it's okay. You're not failing in the negative form of failure when you choose to follow that new spark, that new joy, really. So I'm so excited about that project. Really awesome.
That's good. I'm excited for it too. I'm even more excited now after you just shared that. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah.
So here you are, Madeleine. You are a 3-time author, you know, obviously having a huge impact on the current and former athlete community. You know, like you said, being the person that you needed in your corner when you were going through that rough patch. What is next for Dr. Madeleine Barlow? We could talk long-term future. We could talk like next few years. What comes to mind when I ask you what's next for Madeleine Barlow?
It's a great question. And it's so interesting because next week when I'm meeting with my coach, because I will always have some form of a coach and support in my life, that's exactly what we're doing. We're doing like 1, 3, and 5 year goals because I haven't actually done them. I haven't done those things maybe ever. Never done a 5-year goal, that's for sure. Besides finishing my PhD program, which was about 5 years. And like some of the things that just come to mind while I'm sitting and thinking about it is I want to keep writing. I want to keep sharing, especially because, you know, I found myself finishing The Highly Sensitive Athlete. And by the time I was finished, I already wanted to go back and just like add all these new things that I had learned. But I recognize that what's in it currently is what's meant to be in it, you know, and I'm never going to stop writing. So that's definitely on the docket, is to write more. and we'll see what comes through, like what is, what's really needed in the space to write more about. And my goal is to really have this powerful business. I mean, it is, but it's always going to be something that's transforming. And I currently work with a number of individual athletes. I just launched a group program that I am hoping will fill up with these awesome current or former athletes. And it's about athlete empowerment, more or less, in its most basic form. Kind of how you were talking about recognizing if we placed blame like on coaches or people outside of ourselves, how I was talking about that as well. It's about learning to go inward, enhance your own inner light, really. And so much so that whatever's outside of you can't touch you. It's about finding your own power versus trying to control anything that's outside of you. So I feel like that is going to be really a big part of my journey over the next few years, whether it's in group format or just in general, like the work I'm doing and supporting people in is empowerment and finding that inner power. And I'm going to stop there because I am going to let the rest come when it's meant to come, which is exciting.
Yeah, I love that. That's so great, Madeleine. That's so great.
Yeah.
And I think this will be a good time for you to just share some quick advice, whatever comes to mind, whatever's on your heart to share. If I am a former athlete right now and I'm tuning into this show and I'm like, this is great that Madeleine figured it out. This is great that Taj figured it out. And, they're serving the athlete community, but I'm lost. I don't even know where to start. I don't know what to do. I know, this could easily, this is the scope of your entire work. So it's tough to do it in a short period of time. But just quick advice for anyone who's tuning in right now. What would you share to that athlete who's tuning in right now who just feels lost and they're struggling, trying to figure out who they are without their sport?
Sure. So as an athlete, you've done so much. There's been so much that athletes have accomplished or will accomplish. They've had to be brave, really brave. I will never forget the times I had to step up on the block knowing I was about to do something that was going to hurt a lot. The 400 IM was one of my favorite events, which was just, for anyone that does know what it is and those who don't, it's painful. We're just going to leave it at that. Okay. But I chose to do it anyways. And that took a lot of bravery. It took a lot of bravery to, acknowledge my limitations when I had a shoulder injury and be able to say, okay, I'm not ready to go back. I can't do that right now. In the face of people saying, you're fine. Like, let's go, get back on the field, get back in the pool. There's just so many instances where athletes are choosing to be brave. And that to me is strength, not, pushing through pain. We can see that right now with the Olympics and everything, right? With Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka and all of that, like choosing to acknowledge that you need to stop, choosing to acknowledge that you need support, and then reaching out for that support is the strongest and bravest thing you'll ever do. So find it within yourself to reach out, to say, I need help, and that's okay. It's the strongest thing you'll ever
do. So good. Madeleine, this is one of those episodes where I'm sitting here for a moment. I had to remember, I'm actually like, we're recording this right now. I was sitting here like, this is really good. I like this show. It's one of those ones where I'm excited for people, to listen to this and for this to go out into the world and people to hear the message that you're sharing. But it's also one of those ones where I'm excited to listen back to it personally, because I know that I'm going to be able to take some things from it and be inspired by it. So with that being said, I do want to be respectful of your time. You've already given us so much. This has been phenomenal. Before we get out of here, Madeleine, please tell people, if people want to work with you, if people want to grab the books, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you and to follow your journey and all the great things you're up to?
Awesome. So one of the best places is definitely Instagram for people that have Instagram, which is at MindWise Mentor. I have, the classic link in bio situation that everyone's probably sick of hearing. People be like, oh, go to my link in bio, right? But it is what it is. That's where the stuff is. It's where the good stuff is. So, but you could also go to my website, which is mindwisementor.com if you would prefer that, and fill out any interest forms. I have an interest form for my one-on-one program. Currently, if you're listening to it when this is coming out, I have 2 spaces available to work with people one-on-one, but that's constantly changing. People are going in and out, so I almost always will have a spot for you if you're looking for support. As I mentioned, that group program, there's an interest form for that if you want to learn more or you want to chat with me about what that could look like. And I also do, things like, again, Reiki energy healing one-on-one with people. I do what's called human design. It's a roadmap that literally describes your inner compass and your inner decision maker and all these fun things. So that's something you can order as well. And then otherwise, my books, MadeleineBarlow.com. And as of this morning, it was actually uploaded to Amazon. So we're almost there. It's happening, which is so exciting.
There. One step away. That is so exciting. Exactly. It's so exciting. Well, and folks, we will have all of that in the show notes. So make sure you just go down there and check out all the links to be able to connect with Madeleine. Madeleine, before we wrap up, I just want to say thank you for your time today, number one. But more importantly, thank you for the work that you do. It's an inspiration. I'm just grateful to have connected with you when we did. And like you said, it was divine timing. And also, I'm just grateful to call you a friend and a teammate in this journey that we're on to serve the athlete community. And, it's just a pleasure to have connected with you. And I'm grateful for not only all the work you do, but just who you are as a human being. So sending you much love today. And I just want to thank you again for coming on and sharing on Thrive After Sports and Author Spotlight.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. So awesome.
Awesome. All right, everybody. This has been another great episode of Thrive After Sports and Author Spotlight on the Self-Publishing 30 Days podcast with the Dr. Madeleine Barlow. Make sure you check those show notes and tap in with all the great work she's doing. We'll see you next time, folks. Thanks again, Madeleine.